In this video, we'll talk about how to interact with and integrate your shadow. So, now that you've made a short list of some things that you could work on, difficult feelings, thoughts, situations, or even beliefs, we can now talk with our shadow, or parts of it, and bring it all back together. So, the first thing that you'll want to do is to make some time for yourself, enough time, perhaps an hour, even more. The process can take less time than this, but just in case you need it, you'll want to take some time out for yourself to relax in a calm environment. You may want to play some peaceful music, or to do something called balanced breathing, which can be a very good way of getting yourself into a state where you can more easily connect with your shadow. So balanced breathing is where you breathe in for the count of between 6 to 8 seconds, whatever's comfortable for you. Nice slow long breath in, and then breathe out to the same count. And you just keep repeating that for a couple of minutes. With that done, and now that you're feeling more calm, you can then go into the work with an intention. So you intend to work on a situation or a belief or a difficult feeling, and you open yourself up to what the shadow can tell you. By opening ourselves up to the shadow and saying and thinking this consciously, we can open up the doorway for an interaction to happen. So, now that you are ready to talk with your shadow, you can then begin to ask yourself some questions about the situation. You can ask, where does this feeling or belief, for example, come from? And give yourself space and time and openness to let some suggestions come through to you. This may be a feeling in your body, or it may be some thoughts in your mind. You can then keep asking questions such as, how does this make me feel? What can I learn from you? The shadow, or parts of it, can come up as sub-personalities. They sort of have a life of their own. They have an energetic charge that can rise to the surface when the conditions are right. And the preparation we just talked about is one way to make those conditions fertile for the shadow to come up. And now we can keep asking these questions and gain the unique input of our shadow on that issue. In the course of this process, talking with the shadow, you may feel at times overwhelmed, emotional. You may let out this pent-up energy that is tied up with emotional experiences from the past, and you will be able to release it in whatever way works for you. We're all different. So this technique involves asking questions, getting responses, and being able to start defining the shadow. In the explainer video on what the shadow is, we drew a parallel to the physical shadow where you have the outline but not the details. Now we can get the details. You can name the emotion at play. It may identify itself as anger, or perhaps as unworthiness, for example. Once we have named that emotion, we can dialogue with it. Now, this is a very unique process that will be tailored to you. There may be more or less words involved. It may mean just paying attention to the feelings in your body. These feelings in the body are a form of communication. So just by being with the emotion, we can dissolve its energetic charge, hear its message, and incorporate it back into us so that we can honor what this shadow personality or part is trying to tell us. This then leads to changes in our lives. So once we have identified the shadow using a label or a word, dialogued with it, we can then integrate it. So the final question would be, what can I learn from you? What can I do differently? And why? and you will be able to get authentic and indeed likely original responses that you can then incorporate into your life. Another way to do shadow work is through invoking the inner child. A very similar process to what was just suggested. Make an open space, get yourself calm and relaxed, and imagine that you are visiting a beautiful garden and there is a sandpit in the garden. A younger version of you is playing in the sandpit. They may want to talk with you, they may be playing, they may be angry or sad, but we come into this garden and we attempt to talk with the child. It's okay if the child does not want to talk right now. You just let them know that you are there for them and you are here to listen. The same can also be said of emotions, that you're now aware of them and you're here to listen compassionately and openly. We can then dialogue with this inner child about whatever the situation, issue, or belief is and get to the roots of it. This again can also be quite an emotional process, but it's a very worthwhile one. The shadow is often connected with trauma, and trauma lies in our bodies latently. And subtle trauma can show up as a feeling of constant tightness in the chest when you breathe in, and when you breathe out, you may do chest breathing rather than belly breathing. When our stomach is expanding outwards and contracting inwards with our breathing, that is a sign that we are feeling more relaxed and that we are more at peace. And when it only reaches our chest, it can mean that we are under stress and that we are feeling constrained. So this can be a situational thing, and it can also be a sort of habit of being. A habit of being meaning that it's sort of your default state. It can be either of these, chest breathing or belly breathing. And so, because the trauma is stored in our body, we can end up letting difficult feelings come to the surface. And by coming to the surface, we are releasing and transmuting these feelings into a new form, rather than keeping them trapped. There will be another video that explains possession by the shadow, where when we have not brought the shadow to the surface, interacted with it, and integrated it, instead, when the situation or the right opportunity presents itself, the shadow can come up and sort of take control of our minds and even our actions. So, this is a good thing, even if it is painful to do in this process. So just be aware of this and retain your openness and your compassion and your understanding of the part of the shadow that you are dialoguing with. You can do this dialogue sitting down or laying down. The key, though, is to be relaxed, open, and intentful. It is helpful to think of your shadow, or the part that you're dialoguing with, as something of a person with its own personality, like it's a living thing. This can help you with the interaction process and integrating the shadow. Sometimes, when we're doing meditation, for example, as we tune into our bodies, this can also trigger a release of pent-up and stored energy that may be of a traumatic nature. And this then may cause thoughts and feelings to come into our awareness as they are being released. So the two tools that I've given here are active processes, where we are putting ourselves into a kind of imaginative space where we can dialogue directly with parts of the shadow involved, and the release and integration of the shadow can happen passively, such as through meditation or doing yoga, for instance. So it can happen both ways. One, the passive tools for doing this can take a little bit of a longer time, but they can also be more gradual, and therefore the emotional upheaval or difficult feelings may be at a reduced but span over a longer time frame. When we do active imaginative techniques and we interact directly with the shadow, you can get faster results and changes, but this involves a little bit more turbulence. And either of these are perfectly fine ways to work with our shadow. Again, as it's tied in with trauma, this is in the body, and both of these key ways of doing, or approaches rather, are helping us to release it. I hope that this video was helpful. As always, let me know your comments or any questions that you have, and have a great day.